Hello. So I wanted to make a video here regarding the Fundy Footpath. So for anyone not familiar, this is a trail in New Brunswick. It's known to be the hardest backpacking hiking trail in Atlantic Canada. Can't say for sure whether that's true or not, but that is certainly the reputation. When I was doing research for this trip for myself over the past couple months, I was finding the information was maybe a bit outdated or questionable. So I wanted to make this video to somewhat set the record straight or just generally give more information that's not openly talked about in some of the other materials that are available online. So let's get into it. So first things first, the hardest part of the trail I would not even say is part of the trail. It's actually organizing transportation for yourself to or from the trailhead. It is extremely inconvenient because as of right now, so this is being recorded in 2022, there are actually no taxis or shuttles that service the area. So it can be quite frustrating if you're in a position where you don't have access to two vehicles. I have a strong feeling majority of people trying this are not going to be in that position. So the question is, how do you plan around it? There's a few options. Number one is to hike the trail as an out and back or a yo-yo. Not the greatest option, in my personal opinion. The reason being it is quite difficult. And if you're doing the full distance, it's, 75 ish kilometers. So double that. And the timing as well. So you're looking at close to 150 kilometers in. If you're very fast, it could be as few as 5 days, but most people I would expect would be in the 6 to 7 day to do both directions. And that's not really something that a lot of people want to take on. So, what's the option other than that? Basically, you would be restricted to hitchhiking. And then, how would you approach that? In my view, the best way to do it would be to make it so that you're hitchhiking to the place where you want to start. It's a lot more efficient that way because it's not a huge deal if you're starting the trail a bit late, in my opinion, compared to if you finish the trail in an unfamiliar place and you don't have access to your vehicle. So you want to be in a position where you end the trail, you're done hiking, it's been, 4-ish days, and you can just pop in your car and get out of town, go have supper, wash up, live a normal life again. You don't want to be in a position where you're stuck there, no clear way how to get back to your car, and you don't know how long it's going to take you. So if you are in a position where you're having to hitchhike, definitely hitchhike to your starting point. Second point, which is also has a big impact on enjoyment of the trail, the bugs. So they are pretty much as bad as you can imagine, mostly in the forested areas, which is a large section of the trail. But it's not that noticeable until you're starting to set up and hang around camp. So, as a result of that, I would definitely recommend avoiding, if you can, those deep forested, damp campsites. So, from what I saw, it was Quiddy River was the worst for mosquitoes and midges. I remember one morning I woke up and counted the bites on my hand. There were about 25. So, that was just one hand. It looked like a mess. It was not pretty. So, sites like that you would want to avoid if possible. But of course, there are alternatives too. Bug spray. Not everybody loves DEET, but ultimately it is effective for this. Or just wearing more layers. So I was rocking long sleeves the whole time. Didn't save my hands, but was a lot better for the arms. And then long pants, long socks. Those are all helpful. Personally, I didn't have any experience with ticks on this trail, which was nice. Coming from Nova Scotia, I know that's a big concern here. But on this trail in New Brunswick, did not seem to be a problem. Or maybe I just got exceptionally lucky. The other way to approach it is in your campsite selection. So you could give preference to the beach campsite. So just looking at my map here, the Goose Creek would be an option that definitely has beach access as well as Little Salmon. So those would be, I would think, the two main ones that would give you wind safety from bugs as well as not being excessively busy. So, third on the list, water access is plentiful. So, when it comes to doing your water carries and planning that out, trying to minimize it as much as possible, it is quite easy, in my opinion. So, you're going to be crossing countless brooks, streams, creeks, rivers, etc., almost constantly. So, it's never a long time that you'll go without fresh water access. As long as you have your normal filter system, you're going to be good to go with as little as a liter. You could pretty easily manage the trail carrying only that. And I would say that's true even in the peak of summer. I did the trail at the end of June. It was, into the 20s, very hot. You're sweating excessively, but it's not really a problem no matter how much you're drinking water just because of all of the streams you're crossing. So that is one benefit when it comes to planning your loadout, knowing that you don't have to carry too much water at any given point in time. Next up, number 4, the trail is not super popular. So it's probably not surprising because it's a backcountry, somewhat random trail in New Brunswick that has a reputation of being super hard. The benefit of that, however, is it means unless you're going maybe on a long weekend or something, you are not going to be doing very much competing with people for campsites. So I saw this as a huge advantage. At the same time, it's a bit of a downer because you don't have, the hiking community as something you can enjoy in the evenings in particular, where you just, maybe want to hang around a fire and share stories or whatever. Yeah, so that's not an option for the most part. The number of groups that I passed personally, last week of June, I could probably count it on one hand actually. There was one large group of camp kids, but other than that, there's, I think, 3 solo hikers and then one group of 3 guys. And that was it. So yeah, few and far between the human contact, which you could view as a blessing or a curse. But when it comes to picking whatever campsite you want, it's definitely an advantage because not a lot of competition. Number 5 is trekking poles. They are made for this. So, according to my GPS, it counted about 4,000 meters of ascending and descending. That is quite significant when we're talking about something that can be completed in 3 to 5 days. It's pretty serious, especially if you are just kind of a random weekend hiker like I am. It can be a struggle. So anything that can take some of that strain off of your lower body, I found that very helpful. So it's not just about working on those ascensions and descending, though. It's also helping with, river crossings, muddy sections where you're balancing on a log, maybe. All of that stuff is super helpful, and it comes up constantly on this trail. So I would say trekking poles are close to mandatory, in my opinion, unless you have very significant experience and you just never use them. But for the average person, I would say 100% go for it. You will definitely not regret it. Number 6, so this is about trail maintenance. So, one of the things I actually found most impressive on this trail is how seriously the volunteers were taking the maintenance. So, one side of it is when it comes to trail markings. Backcountry trails don't always have maybe the best reputation of being easy to navigate, but in this case, it absolutely is. It uses the same type of system that I believe the Appalachian Trail does, which is white blazes. So you'll see a single white paint mark on a tree, and that will denote this is where the trail is. And then when the direction of the trail changes, it will have 2 white marks, and that's how you know, okay, it's shifting left, right, whatever, so that you don't go off trail. And for the most part, anytime you look up, you can see between 2 to 3, maybe sometimes even 4 of the blazes in a row. So it's extremely hard to get off trail, basically, is what I'm saying. The need to reference GPS is going to be few and far between. The only time I was really using it was to see approximate distances that I've covered throughout the day and distances to the next campsite. So, yeah, trail management, A. So, point number 7 is that wildlife are active. So, this is probably not terribly surprising given that it's the backwoods of New Brunswick. But yes, you will see a lot of wildlife out here, particularly because the trail is not super busy. Probably the biggest concern at the front of most people's minds would be bears. I personally didn't see any signs of bears, whether it, comes to deuces or otherwise. But you always want to be safe, particularly in a secluded area like this. So a lot of that comes to food storage and food management. Probably not a shock to anybody who's even considering doing this trail, but it is something you need to be safe about. Bears, not seemingly prevalent, but you want to plan accordingly. However, what is definitely going to mess with your food if you are not safe about it is squirrels. So I have never seen this many squirrels in my life, but they're there and they're hungry. So if you are not safe about hanging your food or carrying a bear canister, you are going to be in for some trouble. So those little teeth of theirs will chew through pretty much any food bag. So hanging it is absolutely vital. The other thing you will most likely come across is moose. Really, really cool to experience in their natural environment, but you have to be extremely cautious about it because they are gigantic. They weigh over 1,000 pounds. They're like 10 feet tall. It can be quite scary if you are surprised by them and they're surprised by you. So anytime there's babies around or it's rutting season, you want to be even more careful. But even just in general, always give wildlife their distance, make sure you're respecting their space, and slow movements if it comes to that. So next up, we have the topic of shoe choice, which can really be a make or break sort of situation, depending on, I guess, how much you care about having wet feet. So for me personally, I value dryness extremely high. So when I was making my decision whether to use my normal hiking boots or a pair of trail runners, I lean towards the latter. The reason being that they dry extremely quickly. It can be even within an hour, they'll go from completely soaked walking through a river to feeling relatively dry. And then over the course of an entire day, they will legitimately be dry. You just might need to squeeze them out a little bit after you do a crossing, and then it will pretty much work itself out. If you contrast that, however, with a standard hiking boot, if those get submerged or even just through multiple days of heavy hiking where your feet are sweating a lot, the material that's inside the boot will get damp and it doesn't really have a way to release, particularly because the shoes would be waterproof. It's not very breathable. So, probably not a shocker. But compounded upon that is the fact that the coastal, humid, extremely damp environment that we're dealing with here, you're just never going to have a chance to dry those out. So, that's something I learned the hard way hiking in Newfoundland. And I've tried to carry the experience I got there here by picking some new shoes. So personally, I would highly recommend selecting trail runners over hiking boots for these types of trails on the East Coast. Last but not least, we have probably the most controversial point, which is that the Fundy Footpath is really not a picturesque trail. So when I was planning out this trip, I brought a lot of camera gear. Not just because I wanted to take a video of the journey, which is something I'm working on separately, and you'll probably see posted in the next couple weeks. But also, I was expecting that there would be some really nice beaches and cliffs and that sort of thing to take photos of, particularly after setting up camp. That was not really the case. I spent a lot of time in different sections of Bay of Fundy, and a lot of them are quite beautiful. The ones that are available on this trail, if I'm being completely honest, they don't really hold up to some of those. But, the trail itself is very beautiful. It's a challenge, rewarding, but not necessarily picturesque. So there is a bit of a gap between those concepts. And I feel like this leans more towards the beautiful, but not something you need to remember exactly as it was, more of a concept. All of that aside, though, there are definitely a lot of beautiful viewpoints where you can see more of that environment as it is. So the cliffs and bay and all of that together. But all of those beautiful points are seen from the Fundy Parkway, which is the road that runs kind of in tandem with the trail. You get a higher elevation, you can see way more, you're not obscured in the same way, but it still feels pretty natural. So that is where you should take those types of photos. So to wrap this up, how do I feel about the trail in general? Would I recommend it? All of that sort of things. Yes, I would recommend it. You just have to be smart about your planning. So I hope watching this video will give you some of the tips that help overcome the barriers that I was facing, particularly when it comes to the vast and supreme importance of planning your entry and escape from the trail. If you lock that in, you can have a great time. The other stuff is just minor quality of life stuff. Still important, but if you have that first piece locked in, it should be a pretty easy time to enjoy yourself. That's pretty much all I had on my mind today. So if you have any questions, let me know. But otherwise, I will keep working away on the other video I have on this topic, which is the video detailing all the trials and tribulations I faced when I was personally completing this trail. So look forward to that in a couple weeks. Otherwise, I will see you later. Bye.